Hello there, grumpy old fart here. I do a lot of gaming videos, and one of the things I need to stress in these role playing games that I play is the need to play your character. And when you make a character, you kind of decide the background, his personality, her personality, whatever, because guys can play girls and girls can play guys. It's just. At any rate, excuse me. Sorry. These characters that you make up, they are fleshed out people. It's like you're an actor playing a role, so you have to play that role, whatever that role is. Okay. So when you have a character in a role playing game, you have to play that character. You have to play that character according to whatever background and whatever personality that character has, and sometimes it's not exactly beneficial to a group. Case in point, years ago, my friend Waylon, I did a video on him recently, him and his wife, with a funny story about the election. At any rate, Waylon wanted to run a vampire game. He had an idea for this game, and he said it was supposed to be 3 to 5 players, and that's cool, And we had a group of 5 people, so yeah, no problem, Waylon's a smart guy. He knew the system, and his idea did sound pretty interesting. You're playing a vampire, okay, and a modern day vampire, and his idea was that an asteroid had either hit or came close by or whatever, created an electromagnetic pulse all around the world, so the entire world was pushed back into the Dark Ages, and our 5 players would make up vampires, and he would figure out the backgrounds, which is cool. It's an interesting challenge to play a character somebody else. You make the character, but somebody else comes up with the background and the personality. So it makes for interesting gameplay. Now, my character, according to him, was a despotic megalomaniac. He wanted to rule the world. He wanted to be king. And he was about as ruthless gets. So, he wanted me to play that, and I said, okay. So, the setting was in Alaska, and it was a very remote town. The 5 vampires were the only vampires in the entire area. So it was pretty remote. It wasn't like Los Angeles or whatever where they got a whole vampire subculture. And this town was the economy of the town was run by a nearby military base, which had a huge research facility. And we don't know exactly what they were researching, but at the time we didn't. We found out later. But it was a huge facility, had its own power, had hardened against EMPs, the whole 9 yards, so they still had power. And it was a pretty bad situation. Most of the humans fled for warmer climates immediately. We were literally hunting animals for blood, because vampires got to feed. If they ain't no humans, you go with what you got, right? So we're hunting elk and deer and all kinds of stuff. This little town, the few humans that were left, they weren't going to make it. And being vampires, we prefer human blood if we can. So we struck up a deal with them. We'd help them survive, and they would donate blood. So, because cold doesn't really bother vampires that much. So it worked out pretty good for all of us. But seeing as we had limited options, we figured the best way to keep these humans alive was to head for that research facility, which had its own power and all kinds of stuff like that. So it worked out good. So we headed over, and we broke in, and we found out that I don't know what they were researching, maybe something to dealing with comatose patients, because they had about 100 comatose patients down there, and they were all brain dead, but they were being kept alive. They had all the facilities to do that. They had their own power. They had all the accoutrements of a military base. Most of the soldiers had already been pulled out to go defend other areas, stuff that was more important. So we had a hospital, essentially a hospital, with an underground facility keeping 50 comatose patients alive. Had its own power, had everything, the kitchens, the lots of room, the whole 9 yards. So our humans fit right in. And we made a deal with the doctors and nurses and the orderlies that, we would help protect them if they would help us. And we found out that brain dead bodies in the basement still produce blood. So you can drain a pint a week from each one of them. And, it had helped out a lot. They replenished the blood, and we were able to use it. Now, in a normal situation, that would be abhorrent. However, we're blood-sucking vampires. So, it worked out okay for them. Sometimes being a vampire means you can't be a good guy. So, just the way it is. Vampires are, by definition, monsters. Now, that being said, we worked hard for several months, and we got their arboretum outfitted into a farm so they could grow vegetables. We turned their gymnasium into a ranch, and we had a lot of abandoned farms in the area, and we rounded up a bunch of cattle and brought them back, and we had milk cows, we had cows being raised for beef, the whole 9 yards. And the local townsfolk were helping take care of them. So it worked out, The vampires all went out and hunted and brought back game meat as well, because there was plenty of game with most of the humans traveling to warmer climates. There was, the game was flourishing, so we had plenty of meat as far as that goes. Now we had our own little organized society. It worked out pretty good. The chief doctor was it? The chief. I forget what he was called. The medical, and on a starship, it's a chief medical officer. Whoever the head doctor was, he was running the humans, and we were not subservient to him, but he was a pretty good leader. So we all, chipped in and did our thing. The only problem we had was that there were humans still in the area, but they were organized into bands, and they raided the local areas, especially the hospital, for food and supplies and things like that. And so we'd had a couple of run-ins with them, but it wasn't nothing major. Well, one time they finally got brave and they raided the hospital, killed one of the vampires, chopped his head off. We couldn't stand for that. I mean, we couldn't allow that to happen. So we organized. The rest of the vampires took off we organized a hunt to go get these guys. We tracked them down. We found them asleep at night. They had their little campfire and their tents and stuff. And their cooking pot was going, and they were cooking a stew overnight so they'd have something nice and hot in the morning. And so while we killed one of the vampires, so there was 4 of us still on this hunt. And so what I did was I waited one by one all night long, and I killed the other 3 vampires. So I was the only one left, and I drained their blood, so I had plenty of blood. One of them was actually a younger generation than me, a more powerful vampire. So when I killed him and I drained him, I performed what's called diablerie. So I actually lowered a generation and became more powerful. If you're familiar with the game, you know what I'm talking about. So, just before morning time, I went over to their cooking pot and I put some of my blood in there and mixed it up real good. Put the pot back on and headed back out and waited. One by one, they got up in the morning, dished up a big bowl of that nice hearty stew and started eating, and it was good. They loved it. Well, here's the thing. When a human feeds on vampire blood, they become what's called a ghoul. They are blood-bound to that vampire. And they get some nice abilities. They get extra strength and extra speed, celerity and fortitude, I think it's called. They makes them real tough. So, and the point I'm getting at is they become superhuman servants for the vampire. They can go out in daylight. They can do all kinds of neat stuff that the vampire can't do. But they're completely subservient, loyal to the vampire. You just got to give him blood once in a while. Keeps that up. So I had this, I want to say it was 18 or 20 of them, armed survivalists who became raiders, and now they're subservient ghouls to me with weapons and survival training and the whole 9 yards. So I had my own little army. The vampires were done away with. I was the only one left. So we went back to the facility, and I became king. Because that was my character. I had to play my character. And my character was a despotic megalomaniac who wanted to be king. Well, I became king. King of Alaska. The rest of the players weren't too happy, and there's a reason for that. I mean, it's not like that was pretty much the end of the game, you know, because I couldn't allow any other vampires to come in because they would challenge me. So that was the end of the game, and I enjoyed it, and the other players up to the point where I killed them enjoyed it. But sometimes playing your character is not necessarily to the betterment of the group. Sometimes playing your character can be a game-ending thing. So, but that's what you get when you make a character who has power and wants to be king and is willing to slit throats to do it. So, a ruthless bastard who wants to be king will become king, no matter who either he gets put down or it becomes king. It's just the way it is. I made the character, but I didn't make the personality or the background. So I was told to play the character, so I did. That's what you do. You folks have a good day. God bless one and all.